Okay, folks, welcome once again to our virtual Roadtrek Rally. It's great to see so many on today. And this morning we have a very special guest, Jan Seiner, who's a former employee at Roadtrek. Jan was an engineer through most of his career in various occupations and spent his last 6 years with Roadtrek. So he's got a good knowledge of the inside and integral parts of Roadtrek. So he's going to talk today on troubleshooting. We did canvass the registrants online to list topics they wanted to discuss. And so I sent that list to Jan. So Jan, I'll let you just kind of work your way down the questions. And if there's other ones come up that are pertinent to the topic, I'm sure that you'll be able to handle them, and we're going to keep it informal. We want this to be engaging for everyone to learn as much as they can, and we certainly appreciate you sharing your time here with us today. So without any further delay, Jan, I'm going to ask you to just come on, and you can talk about the questions that I had sent, and then we can ask supplemental questions as we go along if people raise their hands. So Jan, so pleased to have you here with us this morning.
Hey guys, it's great to be here. I don't recognize too many faces. I'm pretty sure I've met some of you in all the get-togethers and some of the others. But I've been involved with Roadtreks and with RVs for, good many years now. And I was hired by Roadtrek before it became Erwinheimer as a project manager and then as a concept design engineer. So it was fun. It was fun while it lasted. We all know it didn't end well, but that didn't stop the fun we had while it was going. Right now, what we do is I actually have a company called Kinetic Adventures, and I'll talk a little bit about that if we have time at the end. One of the things I wanted to talk about with troubleshooting, one of the issues I run into is when something happens, people sort of get this thing, well, I don't know what's going on, and they stop. So I wanted to kind of go through when something goes wrong in your rig and something's not working the way it should or the way you think it should. At that point, it's a little too late to learn about all the systems you have. So, you know, before you go, figure out where your fuse boxes are, figure out where your water pump is, your valves, all that kind of stuff, okay? And you can do that on a walk around. I can help you with some of that. We actually do a day-long Own It You where we go through all that kind of stuff. So just kind of go through your system, make sure you know if your propane system all of a sudden goes kablooey, you make sure you know where your main shutoff valve is, that kind of thing. Did talk about, there's a question about isolators and the difference between isolators and separators and the main power switch. We'll talk about that as well. I do want to talk a little bit also about some of the super basic tools you have. How many of you guys carry a basic toolkit? Okay, got a few people, so a lot of you don't. So you should carry a basic toolkit even if you don't know how to use it. Because if you're in a campground and something goes wrong, if you have the tools you need for your rig, like those little square bits, then maybe the person next to you can say, oh yeah, all you need to do is take this panel off and, twiddle with this thing. But if you don't have the basic tools, then you're stuck, okay? So a couple of things, your basic here, let me switch my camera here. Okay, that didn't work. Let me not switch my camera. Oh, this doesn't work with a virtual back. I'm gonna have to do this in front of my face. Awesome. Your basic screwdriver with interchangeable bits, okay? This is like the most useful thing you can have. It's got a dozen bits in the handle. You should have one of these, okay? Make sure you have those Robertson square bits. Not many people have those. They're called Robertsons. They come in sizes from 0 to 3. You can buy them in any hardware store, okay? Let's see. The other thing you should have is, well, this is where people get glassy-eyed, because I'm going to say you should have a voltmeter. And for most people, look at this thing and they say, you know, this got dials and numbers, and I have no idea what they mean. There is a company called Moto Power, and I don't have one of their units, but they have a unit. And if you are non-electrical and you have no idea what a voltmeter does or how to use it, but you want to know how to check your battery, there's a company called Moto Power, M-O-T-O Power. They make a little unit, and the number is MP0514A. And you clip this thing to your battery, and it tells you whether your alternator's working right, whether your battery's good. It's just got little idiot lights, and it tells you everything you need to know about your electrical system. Okay, super useful to have, especially if you're not technical, and the mention of a digital voltmeter makes you go glassy-eyed. A couple of other things: a fuse puller, fuses for your rig. You should have a box of those. A couple of other things: electrical tape, you know, stuff like that. All right, moving on. We were talking about some of the electrical questions that came up. On the older Roadtreks, the main power is controlled by that push button switch, and you push it, and something goes clunk and your power comes on, and you push it again and it goes clunk and your power goes off. Okay. Know where that unit is. You can hear it. You can kind of find the cabinet that it's in by listening to it. If it stops going clunk, there's two reasons for that. One is that your battery voltage is too low. If your house batteries, if your coach batteries have died, that thing will not have enough power to switch over. The other thing is it has two 5-amp fuses in it. If one of those fuses goes out, it won't work, which is why you need to know where it is, and you need to have a box of fuses. So there's also the way that unit works. Every time you push the button, it flips over. So you push the button once, it turns on. Then you push it again, and it turns off. And you push it and it turns on. So it's not a, it's not a continuous thing. It basically latches open, it latches closed every time you push that button. So that there's some question on the units. There's a lot of confusing information out there about, well, it has to be on for your batteries to charge when you're plugged in, and you have to turn it on before you plug in. I'm not really sure if any of that's true. As far as I know, when you plug in, you turn the batteries on, it'll charge. Okay. Let's see. Okay, dead batteries. We did talk a little bit about dead batteries. On the Chevys, the newer Chevys, when you get into the 2000 era Chevys, they were designed to be commercial vehicles, and there's an expectation that they're going to be driven all the time. And what'll happen is your engine battery will go dead if that vehicle just sits there for a week or two. Okay. So if you're going to leave your Roadtrek sitting somewhere for a couple of weeks or a month, you need to make sure to disconnect the engine battery or it'll be dead. Okay. And that's normal. There's a lot of computers on cars. On a typical vehicle today, there's dozens and dozens and dozens of little computers everywhere. And they all draw power even with the ignition off. So your battery will go dead on its own after a couple of weeks. Okay, so if you leave your coach sitting, disconnect the battery. Okay.
Yeah, and that's only for the recent Chevys, though. It's not for Dodge.
the newer the chassis, the worse the problem. So some of the older ones, I'd say anything before 2000, you can probably leave sitting for a couple of months. But the newer ones, they started adding more computers, and there's a computer to run the transmission, and there's a computer to run the engine. And on the new ones, there's even a computer that runs like your door chime when you open the door and that buzzer goes off. On the new ones, that's not a buzzer. That's a computer sending a signal to your radio to make the sound through your radio. All these computers control use power, okay? So the newer the machine, the worse the problem is. I'd say anything before 2000, and certainly when you get up in before 90, that's not an issue, okay? Let's see.
Okay, I see that Rhonda has a question.
Okay.
Rhonda, do you want to push your space bar to ask your question, please?
Yeah, and I do have a question. You mentioned something about this clunk when you turn the power on in the older units. We have an 06, the Sprinter model. I've never heard a clunk. When you talk older units, what age are you talking about? And are you talking about all the vans, or just the Chevy vans, or the?
Is it the inverter switch?
Yeah, is it the inverter switch that we should be listening for?
No, well, on yours, you have that contact relay that turns the power on and off. I'm pretty sure it's sitting under the driver's seat in the pedestal. So when you turn the main power on and off, you should hear a click from under your driver's seat. Now that's only for the Sprinters. For everybody else listening, that's not for the Chevys and the Dodges. On the Sprinters, that relay is sitting under the driver's seat.
Well, I do hear it.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Let's see. And then on some of the really, really old units, they didn't have a main power switch. Okay. So if you, and I'm not sure when that changed, but don't, if you don't find one, that doesn't mean you can't find one. It means it may not be there. Let's see. The difference between an isolator and a separator. Okay. On most of the units up until about 2003 or 4, and I'm not sure when the change was made, what you have is an isolator. What the isolator does, when you start your engine, it allows the engine to charge your house battery. Okay. But it does not allow your coach electrical system to drain the engine battery. It's a one-way, like a one-way valve for electricity. The isolators are super reliable. They work very well, but they have a life of about 20 years. So for most of you in the 2000 vintage and earlier, your isolators are probably at the end of their life, okay? It's a simple job to replace them. On the Chevys and on the Dodges, they're either inside the engine bay on the firewall or down on the frame rail. Not a big deal to replace them. So, but here's the thing, if they fail, then your electrical system goes out for the engine as well. And they will fail at the worst possible moment. When it failed on me, I was in the middle of the largest highway intersection in Portland, Oregon. And I coasted to a stop in the median, and there was like 18 lanes of traffic every which way I could turn. If you start seeing strange issues like your house batteries aren't charging, or your car is slow to start, or it seems like your engine battery isn't working right, get your battery tested. You can go to any like AutoZone, any place like that, and they'll test your battery. If your battery test's okay, then start looking for the isolator. Okay.
Yeah, and Gene has a question. Do you
Okay.
want to push your space bar, Gene, and ask your question, please?
Yeah, two questions, I guess now. Is a spare isolator something that you would carry with you?
You could. I mean, it might be easier just to have somebody replace it if you were They don't fail all of a sudden. They don't fail catastrophically, at least not to my knowledge. They fail very gradually over a couple of years. So if you start having strange gremlins in your electrical system, that would be one place to look. Okay. And they're about $100, maybe $200 part. I mean, they're not super expensive.
I think I've seen one on Amazon.
Yeah, I think they're now made by Sure Power. And it's a little box. It's maybe 4 by 6 by 2 inches. You know, and it's got 3-4 studs on top. They're not, like I said, they're not very difficult to install or replace.
My second question was going back to Rhonda's question. Where is the main power switch? Where should the clunk be coming from in a 97 Dodge?
Oh boy. On a lot of those, they were built into the cabinetry. Where is your fuse box on the 97s?
The main house one is on the driver's side, back behind the cabinet, under the
They're
bed.
like under the bed.
Yeah.
So most likely your main switch would be very close to near that box in the same cabinet.
What does it look like?
Good question. It's about 2 by 4 by maybe 4 inches. It looks like a little cylinder, and it's got on top, you'll see 2 fuses, and then it's got 2 fairly big wires coming into it because it's the main power switch, and then it's got, I want to say, a couple of small wires going into it because that's the control wires. Okay, and it'll be usually bolted to the wall with the fuses up.
Is there any place, I mean, I'm one of the people who had electrical issues, and I wrote into Roadtrek, I emailed saying, is there a diagram? Is there something that has pictures that shows you what these things look like? And I got an answer back, I don't have access to anything other than what's online, which is virtually nothing for a 97. Right. Is there any place that at least shows you what these things look like and where they are?
Not to my knowledge. A lot of this was done, you know, there were documents internally in the company, but there was nothing official that would be released. Okay. So I unfortunately, you know, if I could put my hands on your unit, I could find it fairly quickly, but it might take me 20 minutes on some of them. Okay. But usually it'll be close to your charger and your fuse box.
Thank you.
I think someone else had their hand up, but then they may have taken it down. So I'm not sure if their question got answered. Or do we have one more person with a question?
It was me, but he answered it as soon as I raised my hand.
Okay,
I just wanted to know the warning signs of the isolator going bad.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, so on some of the newer units, you'll have a separator, which looks like the closest I can come to is a soup can, you know, a little single serving soup can with wires going in the top. And again, it'll be mounted somewhere in the engine on the firewall usually. The separator is actually a mechanical device. And every time you turn the engine on, it pulls in to charge the battery. When the engine's shut off, it unswitches. Those are also quite reliable. But again, like everything mechanical, they do wear out. So, but if that fails, the only thing that'll happen is it'll quit charging your house battery. It will not leave you stranded like the isolators will. So there was a question about how to test the isolator. So this is where you need a voltmeter and you need to know how to use it. The isolator, when you find it, typically it'll be on the firewall. If you open the hood, you look on the back firewall, it'll be a blue or a red box mounted on the firewall. Or on some of them, if you're really unlucky, it is mounted down on the frame rail underneath the engine. So what you need to do is you need to find the wire that goes from the alternator, the wire that goes from the engine battery, and the wire that goes from your house batteries. And that one, yes. That's what an isolator looks like. Some of them will have a fourth post, but that's exactly what we're talking about. So it's 80 bucks.
So my understanding is that the Dodge has a 3-post isolator. The center one is coming from the alternator, and then one side goes to the house battery, one side goes to the engine battery, and then the Chevy uses the same thing, only it's got a fourth smaller post, which somehow senses current or something. Is that right, Jan?
Yeah, on the Chevys, the alternator on the Chevys requires an exciter current. And so the alternator needs a small wire, and that's what that's for. That actually is, and there's a long technical reason for it. I'm not going to go into alternators. But on the Chevys, there's a fourth smaller post. Okay. The way you test them, those 3 posts, once you figure out where each wire is going, you take your voltmeter and you measure the voltages. Okay. There should not be a very large voltage drop across them. So if you're measuring 13.8 on the alternator and you're measuring 11.5 going out to your house battery, that's a problem. Okay.
Is this being measured as the engine is running?
Yes, this is being measured as the engine is running, and after it's had a chance to charge up your house batteries for a while. So once
okay, I see Harish has a question. Harish, go ahead.
Turn your mic on.
Push your space bar. There you go.
Jan, I had sent a couple of questions to Doug. I don't know if you got my written questions or not. It's question number 2 on my list. It has to do with the battery switch. I mentioned that I have a solar installation, and I recently upgraded or replaced my converter and also replaced my transfer switch along with the converter. So the one time by accident I had left the battery switch off and the solar was on, but the solar didn't seem to charge the battery. After a couple of days it dropped down to about 10. So my question is, does solar charging have anything to do with not being able to charge the battery when the battery switch is off?
Good question. Now, you had the solar was installed aftermarket, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so what it sounds like they did is they ran the charge wire from the solar to the switched side of your power feed.
Okay.
So it's not always connected to your batteries. Only when the switch is on is it connected to your batteries. So if you can find out who did it.
Jan, actually, I did it myself. I did the positive terminal coming from the solar. I hooked it up to the positive terminal of the battery.
Then it should charge.
Positive coming from the charge controller is going directly to the battery.
Then it should charge all the time.
Okay.
And there must be another issue.
Okay. The one comment I wanted to make was somebody wanted to know where the switch for the main power is. Is it not the main breaker on your control panel, on your converter? On the converter, there is one breaker which says 30 amp breaker. Is that not the switch to the main on the entire system?
No. What that is, that the 30 amp is for the AC power. That's when you're plugged in.
Mm-hmm.
What we're talking about is the solenoid switch on your control panel. You have that battery disconnect switch.
Yes. Yes.
When you push that once, you'll hear a clunk, and your power either goes on or off.
Yeah, but that is controlling the 12 volt power to your 12 volt appliances. It's not controlling the 120 volt powers. Correct.
That is correct.
There is no such thing as a switch for the 120 volt power.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
That's why I wanted to make that clear, that there is no switch for the 120 control. The only thing is you hook it up or you unhook it. That's the only way you can control the 120 volt. Am I right?
Yes, or you flip that 30 amp breaker if you want to kill the power to the power.
All right, thank you.
Okay, we also had Brenda with her hand up, but she took it down. So did we get your question answered, Brenda?
Yes, I was trying to figure out how you measure the isolator. I've had a few electrical problems, and I wondered whether, I never even thought it might have been the isolator. Okay, so I didn't know how to check and see if it was failing. So actually, could you go back? You said that the voltmeter, if you have any drop across that's different across any of the three of them, can you just define different a little bit? I mean, what would be a large enough difference?
So the two things can happen. You need to, if you know how to use a voltmeter, you need to have a good ground for the black side of the voltmeter, and then the red side of the voltmeter goes on the post that you're trying to test. If you have, let's say your alternator's running, and your alternators typically will put out about 14.4 volts. So you'll see about 14.4 on the leg from the alternator. You should see no more than about 1 volt drop through the isolator.
Just for her clarification, the center post would be measuring the voltage from the alternator, and then when you put your red test probe on either of the other two posts, one is going to the house battery, one is going back to the engine battery, and that is where Jan means that there would be up to possibly 1 volt difference in those two outside post tests. Correct, Jan?
Yeah, that is correct. And if you're doing that and you're seeing voltage drops more than that, then your isolator is starting to fail. And don't feel bad. I had gremlins in my electrical system, and I replaced the alternator, and I replaced the starter, and I replaced a whole bunch of wiring before I finally figured out that it's the isolator. So, you know, you're not alone. Okay, so let's see. Are there any more questions on electrical?
Yeah, we got another question here from Mary Ellen, and following her, Mary and Kevin. So go ahead, Mary Ellen first.
Hi, it's kind of electrical. We have a 2007 Chevy 190 with the Trip Light 750 watt inverter.
Okay.
And a friend of ours very graciously gave us the identical unit, but 1500 watt, that was really not used. It's slightly bigger physically, which is not an issue because it goes under the back seat to the right, like on the driver's side. My question is the wiring that was already put in the 2007 for the 750 watt good enough, like in the walls, etc., to just do a plug and play safely?
The question would be: is the wiring from the batteries large enough to the alternator large enough?
Yeah.
I can't remember. You would need, for 1500 watt, you would probably need 2 gauge at least. And
Okay.
I think of those they used 4 gauge, which would be too small.
Okay. All right.
1500 watts, you're going to be drawing 120 amps, give or take, with that thing running at full bore. So your wiring needs to be big enough to take that, and that's 2 gauge.
Okay. The whole reason we wanted to do this was literally just to be able to use our microwave, which is 1000 watt, which I think is the original actually, without having to boot up the generator every time.
Right.
Like our 750 does everything else, coffee pot, laptops, all that kind of stuff. It just, the microwave uses the generator.
Yeah.
And it was just a cheat. That was all.
There's tables you can look up the size you need.
Yeah, I worked that out. Yeah, my question was I couldn't find anywhere what the wiring size would be.
I think it was 4 gauge.
Okay. All right, so don't do it unless I'm willing to tear apart the Roadtrek.
Yeah, and if I remember right on those, your batteries are pretty close to where the inverter is.
Yeah, they're actually on the inverter's under the driver's side at the back wheel. The batteries are on the passenger side, the back wheel.
Yeah, so it wouldn't be too bad, but yeah.
Yeah, so it's just the wiring from the batteries to the inverter. We don't have to worry about the inverter into the rig.
No, that's all fine.
So that's doable because we want to add a second battery anyway, so we were going to work on that. So
cool. All right.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Okay, Mary and Kevin had a question.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. I think you've answered my question. About almost 2 years ago, the alternator, the battery indicator was going down, so I stopped and they checked and I needed a new alternator and got a new battery. And since then, the alternator, the battery gauge goes down to 13 or goes below 14, like whatever that gauge is between 14 and 0. And it always worried me because that was an indicator that the alternator was going down, but it'll always go back up. So, but that's been going on for almost 2 years now. And I'm thinking it's the isolator, you think, that's causing that? Every time I get in to start it, it starts right up. And for the most part, the gauge stays at 14, but it'll go way down at certain points. I don't know what those points are. So what do you think that I should just go ahead and replace the isolator?
I'm always super hesitant to tell people to just start throwing parts at things.
Mm-hmm.
But I would definitely measure the voltages on the isolator and just look,
Okay.
See what it looks like. If it's all like corroded and nasty and rusty, yeah, probably needs replacing anyway.
I couldn't find it. I just went out there when you showed it on the screen. I can't find it in the engine. So
What do
I
you
might
have?
be one. It's a 2004 Chevy, the 3500.
Look under the engine on the passenger side frame rail, about 1.5 feet behind the radiator.
Okay.
It may be just bolted to the frame rail.
Okay, so that's what I need to get a mechanic to do. Okay.
And down there, they also put non-weatherproof breakers down there. which are also probably toast.
Okay.
So we're going to have to replace the isolator and the breakers.
Got it. Thank
Okay.
you.
Okay, we had Harish with his hand up, and then I see Joe's got her hand up. So Harish, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Hi, Jan. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I recently had a breakdown of my converter. And according to the RV technician, Jeff at Mobile Life, it was caused by a fluctuation in the voltage of the campground where I was camped. Apparently, according to him, when there's a large number of users using the same, the power, then the voltage fluctuates from 120 to 108 or something like that. And then when the voltage drops, then the amperage goes up. And what happened in my case is that the neutral bar on the converter completely got burned. So my question to you, and so I had to replace the converter. The question is that other than this device that I carry with me, can you recognize that?
Absolutely.
Is there anything else that one can use to protect oneself against these variations in the voltage?
Okay, let me, it's going to get a little shaky here. I'm going to walk outside. I'm going to show you what I use. So what I use is one of these. Hang on. Okay. It's a surge guard. You see it?
Surge guard. Who makes it and where do you get it?
This is a company called Southwire.
I'm sorry?
And it's the one I have is model 44260. Now, that's the basic model, okay? They make them all the way on up to where they will analyze the voltage, and if anything's wrong, they will shut it off and all that.
I have also seen some rather large, very heavy-duty devices that are hanging from the pole, and some people put a lock to it so that they want to stop other people. I found it very unwieldy. Is this easy to handle, this one that you have?
Yeah, it's what I have is the baby brother of the ones you see.
Okay.
Southwire also makes those giant boxes, and there you have microprocessors that analyze everything and shut the power off. This one just protects you against power spikes and just bad power.
In your opinion, this is a good thing to carry with you and use it at your campground?
Yes.
Am I right? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. I'll look for it.
Okay, we had Joe McKay was up next, and then we've got Debbie.
Hi, thanks very much.
Is it like a switch on top of your battery?
So what I'm trying to show you a lever. Here we go. So
yeah.
He was saying that I had to disconnect this every time I parked and was using my coach battery, or else it would drain this battery, my engine battery. I have never done that and never had a problem.
Right. I think you got a little bit of bad information. If your isolator works correctly, it'll do the job of that switch right there. Okay. What that switch is for is it's what we talked about at the very beginning. If you leave your coach parked for 2 months, then open that switch, and that disconnects your battery and keeps all the computers from running. Okay. Now, the downside that your computers learn how you drive, and that when you reconnect it after a couple of months, your Roadtrek isn't going to run very well because it has to relearn how you drive. Okay, so it'll
even with a 98. I have a 98, so
yeah, even with a 98, they already had adaptive computers that controlled all kinds of things. And it's much worse than the new ones.
Okay.
So yeah.
Okay. So when I parked this for the winter, I was planning, because it's cold where I live, I was planning on disconnecting the battery altogether. Is that not a good idea?
Yes, and that's what this switch does. You just open that up and the switch disconnects everything.
Well, I mean, I guess I should say, okay, I was actually planning on bringing the battery inside so it wasn't out in the cold.
Right, you could do that too, and then in that case, you don't need the switch. Just one more part to fail.
Okay. Okay, great. So this is not something I do on a regular basis.
No.
Great, thank you.
Okay, next we have Debbie. Go ahead, Debbie. Then we have Kathy.
Okay, I wanted to bring the protection mechanism information back up again. Jan talked about the surge protector, and I really think everyone should know the difference between the surge protector and the device that Harish was talking about that is bulky, because that's called an EMS, electrical management system, and they are two very different animals. One is a little less expensive than the other, but you just need to know what each one does and then make your choice. I just luckily was talked into buying the EMS, and I'm going to show you the one that Harish was talking about that's so bulky. This is really high tech, but there's the photo on my phone.
Right.
That's Progressive Industries, and they sell a surge protector, and they also sell an EMS system. And I was in a campground that had a lightning strike, 50, 60 yards from our campsite, and it created a neutral, I don't know, Jan, it did something to the electrical system in the campground. And I was the only camper in the entire campground that did not have damage done to their vehicle, to their camper. If anything were to happen to that box, it has a lifetime warranty. They'll replace the box itself. But what Harish was talking about happened to me recently at a campground, busy campground, and the voltage dropped because so many people were on whatever 30 amp, it must have been 30 amp, and they recommended I go to either 50 amp or 20. But my EMS system just kept shutting my Roadtrek down, and I wasn't sure why. And then I looked at the box and saw there just wasn't enough voltage going through, and that's what it does. It shuts everything down rather than destroying things. It's something everyone needs to look at, and you can just Google surge protector versus EMS, and you'll find lists and lists of what the two different items do. And I really recommend, I know they're expensive, $300, but save my butt.
Right, and you're right. I mean, basically the one that I have is the first most basic layer of protection. You can go to, and Southwire makes the similar system with the Progressive, and they're large and they're bulky, and they have a little screen that tells you what's going on, and they do analyze everything. It just depends on what your comfort factor is.
Okay, so we're going to move forward here, folks. We got Kathy next, and then Brenda waiting. Go ahead, Kathy.
Hi. Are we just talking about electrical, or can I go into a different aspect?
Ask your question.
Go ahead.
All right. Up until the last year, I've had my Roadtrek for 8 years. It's a D170 2000.
Mm-hmm.
This past week, I was out for a few days, and when I turned on the pump to use the kitchen sink, it was leaking not just out of the spigot, but around the base of the faucet unit.
Mm-hmm.
And I basically just kept the pump off so I wouldn't have leaks, because it was leaking into the drawer.
Okay.
Silverware drawer. How difficult is it to replace those faucets? I mean, I read through the files in the Roadtrek group online,
right.
People saying they had to use mirrors, yada, yada, yada. I don't like doing plumbing, but during COVID, I don't want to drive to an RV repair place and have someone breathing germs all over my Roadtrek when I want to sleep in it that night.
Yeah, the faucets are very difficult to get to. I will give you that. And you may need to make sure you have some PEX tubing and some shark bite fittings to make everything work.
Okay.
But I really can't. Yeah, sorry. Can't give you much other than that.
Okay, and then the second issue I had this week was the refrigerator. It's an RM 2333.
Right.
I have a full tank of propane, and midway into the first night I was out, the refrigerator stopped working. The propane went out. It had been really hard to light the last couple times I went out. Like I would have to hold the button and hit the igniter 10, 12, 15 times before it would light. And that is having the burners on the stove going to get the gas moving through the line.
Right.
It was not windy out, because I did previously have a situation where the refrigerator went out and
right.
It was just incredibly windy, but there was no wind. I was parked on about a 2.5 degree grade,
right.
both side to side and front to back. So I don't know if I was just too close to, if that could have caused it.
No.
But all the other gas appliances worked, but the refrigerator went out. I couldn't get it restarted again.
So either was there smell of gas at all from the fridge?
No. And I have a brand new detector inside. Okay,
so I don't know. I mean, offhand, it could be any number of things. It could be something as simple as the igniter. It could be dirt in the line. Just be rust in the jets. I mean, really, you're really going to need to either take it apart or get somebody to take apart just the burner assembly to clean it out. Make sure there's no rust or dirt or anything like that. Bugs, say mud daubers, love to build their nests in there. So make sure that whole burner assembly is clean. That would be where I would start.
Do you access that from the outside?
Yeah, from the outside, that lower access door for your fridge.
Mm-hmm. I actually, I opened it up. I couldn't actually see anything.
Yeah, the burner assembly is usually as you're looking into that opening on the right. There's a vertical tube that may be 2 inches in diameter, and it goes up. Mm-hmm. And the burner assembly is at the bottom of that. That's where the igniter is and the nozzle is. And so you need to check that and make sure that there's no dirt, mud, rust, crud, spider webs, or anything like that in there. That's where I would start. Okay.
When I got home, I plugged in to make sure that it worked on AC, and there was no problem with that. So I have not tried to restart it since then.
It's the burner assembly, so just clean it out really well and see if that helps.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Okay, next we've got Brenda. Brenda, go ahead, please. Then Frank's following her.
I have some quick questions on the waistlines. So there's the two gate valve, I think they're gate valves, that you pull to for the black water and for the gray water. I was down there this morning doing some repairs, and I noticed how rusty the lines were and on the outside of the rods. And I put WD-40, I did them with a wire brush and put WD-40 on it. But what is the best way to maintain those, to keep them moving?
Okay, I'm going to go into my WD-40 rant. I do not like WD-40.
Oh.
It's great for what it is. If you have wet parts and you need to get rid of the water, spray them with WD-40. Then you clean the WD-40 off, and then you get a lubricant.
Okay.
WD-40 was designed to remove moisture. And somehow they marketed this as this magic lubricant for everything. It's basically fish oil is the largest ingredient in it. And I love it for what it is. But there's many other better lubricants. So once you have the rust off,
I'm not sure I can get it all off. It's
that's not
pretty tough.
Yeah, that's not a big deal. You can get. I wouldn't even worry too much about it as long as it's not interfering with the operation of it. There's nothing wrong with the valves, right? The valves still work.
The valves still work. The actual plastic handles have pulled off, and I've forced them back on. I don't know if those can be replaced.
They normally screw on and off, so you should be able to screw them off and buy replacement ones.
Oh, okay. All right.
Okay.
And also, does anybody use like coconut oil or vegetable oil down their tanks to help lubricate those valves? I've seen that mentioned on the forum to every once in a while put some vegetable oil or coconut oil, seems to be popular, down the tank and then push the valve in and out a few times to help lubricate.
Yeah. Anything like that, it will work. I mean, it certainly does no harm. You do want to operate the valves every so often. This is part of the maintenance you should do, the larger maintenance in general. At least once a year, you should turn every valve on your Roadtrek. That includes your bypass valves, every valve you can find. Turn it just to make sure it still works and to keep it from just seizing up. The best thing with the valves, with the dump valves, with your toilet, those are rubber seals, and as you operate them, as the sliders go in and out, they actually keep that rubber flexible and sealing. If you don't operate them for a very long time, they can get stiff in that position, then they won't seal as well. And you slide out, and all of a sudden the valve will not seal. Certainly operate them, and if you want to use coconut oil, I've never done it, but I've never heard anyone who had any trouble after it. So certainly does no harm, and it might do some good. I would caution against. I've seen people saying, "Oh, just use cheap vodka instead of antifreeze." Don't. Even cheap vodka, it's not the right thing. And alcohol dries out rubber. It's a good way to destroy all the rubber in your waste system. So,
good. Jan mentioned WD-40, and I'm going to show you a product here. So WD-40, we use it generically, but they have a whole bunch of different products. This is water-resistant silicone that's available, and I use this. It comes out kind of like as a silicone powder, so it's not gummy. But WD-40 has about 4 or 5 different products. This is one of them. So when we talk about WD-40, it's important to know which product we're talking about, because they make about 6 different ones. And just so we know that. But Jan is right in terms of the basic WD-40 was meant to suck up moisture. It's not meant to be a penetrant, but they do also make a penetrant product.
So should I clean the WD-40 off that I put on and put something else on? And what would you recommend?
Yeah, you can clean it off. Just wipe it off with a rag. I mean, you don't need to get all nuts about it. And then use even that WD-40 silicone spray that Doug just had, or I use PB Blaster products, but they're all for all practical purposes. At this level, they're all fairly identical. The biggest thing is anything thick and gooey will attract dirt. So use a very thin coat of a very light oil, and that'll keep dirt from sticking. Okay. Where possible, I like to use like the Teflon dry lubes, but they don't last as long. Okay. Yeah,
okay, so we're going to move on. We got Frank and then Rhonda, and then we're going to close off with fixing the leaks on the 3 top windows. So Frank, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I have a 2003 Chevy Roadtrek 200. And my problem is with the gas stove inside. Before we went to Calgary, the one burner at the front flared up. We couldn't control it, but the rear burner is fine. I took it in to see about getting it checked out, and I thought it was probably the regulator. The guy replaced the regulator, and he'd still done the same thing. And I had that done at Campers World on my old Dodge, and they had to replace it 3 or 4 times to get a regulator that worked. And I asked him the question. He says they use a Dometic regulator now, and they shouldn't fail, but he wants to replace the whole gas stove at a cost of around $200 to $300. Does that sound like from a 2003, 17 years old, that I should be replacing that, or is it just the regulator?
Well, you can, I'm trying to remember what that looks like on those. I'm pretty sure there's 4 like thumb screws that hold the top cover on that stove. You can take those, there's 2?
Yes.
Yeah, take those off, pull that cover off and look and see what's going on. My guess is that on that front burner, the burner tube rusted out and it's letting too much gas through. And you should be able to see that. You'll see some gas, some corrosion on there. And that would be a cheap way to look at it and say, yep, I need a new stove, or, you know, maybe get on eBay and find just a new burner. But my guess is you're going to be looking at a new stove.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
Okay, and we've got Rhonda for the last question for now before we go to the windows. Rhonda?
I've got 2 little things. The first is that today is my wife Rhonda's birthday. I'm Daniel. And I want to say that our happiness as road trekkers is entirely due to her diligence in researching RV maintenance and then performing it. So we run all over the country without trouble. One little problem we're facing right now is that our car doors, the driver's door, the passenger's door on our 06 Sprinter Adventurous are getting increasingly tough to operate. And I don't like to, the door latches are getting tough and resistant. And I don't know if we're not lubricating them correctly or whether the doors are out of alignment or what's going wrong there. And maybe somebody has a suggestion.
This is on the Sprinters, and it's the actual door latches, and not the hinges.
No, the hinges move fine. It's the door latches that don't engage easily and are even worse when you try to open it. It's
okay. Take it to a body shop and see if they can realign the doors.
Okay.
It sounds maybe over time that the doors themselves the hinges might have sagged a little bit. And it's not hitting. There's a pin on the door, and the latch has to hit it just right.
Yeah.
Well, and if it's misaligned, it's going to be super difficult to do.
Okay.
So just any body shop. It does not have to be a Mercedes dealer. Any body shop should be able to look at it and tell you, yeah, you got a problem. You know, and probably it's a minor adjustment, I would hope.
Thank you, Jan.
Okay.
Okay, Jan. We've got one more question from Boyd that we'll handle later, but right now I promised a couple people we'd have you talk on the 3 little windows up top, and I think there's a different version of those windows depending on what year you have. And a lot of people sometimes have leaks, but it's difficult for them to figure out where the leak is, number 1, and number 2, how to fix it. And on the forums, we've had some discussion that people get up there and they dupe it all up with silicone around the seals, but then they are told that the seals aren't what really keeps the water out, that the water is kept out from another seal in underneath. So could you just give us a little tutorial on troubleshooting leaks in the 3 roofs, and maybe there's a difference between the 2 types of windows that we may have?
Yeah, the newer Chevys, the windows were glued in. The older ones, I thought it was a two-part gasket, which is basically like two U's stuck together back to back. And then there's a center bead that gets pushed in that locks it all in place. And so one part of the seal slides up against the flange and the fiberglass. The other side gets the glass itself. And then there's like a little rubber bead that gets pushed in. I'm pretty sure that was the system that they used on those. Where the leak is coming from is super difficult to find out. And this actually goes back to the lady that was asking about the shower curtain. The way the walls are constructed is you have a very thin sheet of Luan plywood. It's like an 1/8 inch thick plywood. And there's insulation. And so when there's a leak, it'll get on the back of that plywood and it'll run down that plywood and it'll drip down inside the walls, down the sheet of plywood against the wall. And then it comes out in the footwell by the passenger seat. And actually it's coming in the roof, but you don't see it because it's all inside the walls. It can be super difficult to track down where the leaks are coming from. I don't know the specific gasket that was used for those windows, but I would think that if you have the older style windows with the rubber gasket, you need to replace the gasket. And C.R. Lawrence actually still makes those gaskets. As far as I know, C.R. Lawrence still makes them. So you should, and you can buy it. You just need to figure out which one you have. There's several different kinds. And then buy so many feet of it and have somebody install it.
Okay, now I'm just going to show you a picture here quick. And you can tell me if I'm showing you the right thing here. So is this a cutaway of that?
Yes.
Okay.
That's the gasket. And you can see that it's like two U's stuck together, and then it has that little lock key thing that slides in to lock it in place.
Yeah, it folds around and locks in.
Yeah. Yeah. Some of them, the ones they have now, actually, they don't have that built-in lock. It's a separate bead that gets pressed in, but it looks exactly the same as that.
Okay, so that is when the window is merely held in by that gasket. Is that correct?
Correct.
Now there's some units, I think were older, that those windows were in. There's like some people report a steel frame around. Was that an earlier version?
Oh boy, that I am not familiar with that.
Okay. So any other questions relating to the 3 top windows leaking? Do you have any sense, Jan, where the most popular leak is? Is it in one of the center windows or one of the outer windows? Is it the bottom, the top, or where would you start looking, or have you run into that much?
I would say if you have a leak in one, I would do them all, because the gaskets are all going to fail about the same time. You know, in the 200s, the leaks are around the back lights. And in all the Chevys from that vintage, there's the cover over the air conditioner uses well nuts, and those are rubber, and those can fail, and that's another source of leaks. But again, I mean, you find out because your mattress is wet and there's no moisture anywhere else, but your mattress is soaked and it's actually coming in through the well nuts in the air conditioner, but the walls are dry. So it's very, very difficult to track down where the leaks are because of the way the walls are constructed.
So yeah, because many people have stains in their walls, and so they're not realizing that water could come from the window or the roof or the air conditioner. So how hard are those walls to come off? Like if you pry off those little dome covers. There's a screw in behind there, I assume. Can those walls be taken off fairly easily to help track?
Yeah, that actually is one of the tools I was going to talk about. To pry off those little fabric covered screw covers, there's a company called Bojo, B-O-J-O, and they make plastic body tools. And they make one that looks like a little fork, and you just pop it behind there and pop those off. It keeps you from tearing up the fabric with a screwdriver or scratching anything. Highly recommended. Yes, you pop those off, the screws come out, and the whole panel will come out, and you can see what's behind it. Now, you can't always get the panel out of the vehicle because the panels are going first and then the cabinetry went in. But you can get enough of it off to where you can look and see what's going on behind it.
Okay, great. Any other questions on those three windows before we move on to Boyd's question? Okay, Boyd, go ahead with your question then, please.
Okay, I think I'm on.
Yeah,
Can
go
people
ahead.
hear me?
Yes.
Yep, you're on.
Okay, good. I got myself unmuted. My question is about the grills on the back of, I've got a 99 Dodge 190 Versatile, and I'm planning on taking the bottom grill off and replacing it with a new one. And I can't find any assistance on how that is held in. The top part is held with the rubber gasket, but the bottom, I sort of suspect that there's screws holding that on. Have any insight on that, Ian?
On
John?
the Dodges? Oh boy. You sure it's not riveted on?
Well, it might be, but I can't. There's that plastic trim that goes all the way around that covers up the screws that hold the fiberglass to the metal body, and it might be behind that. I'd like to know what's behind there before I actually take that plastic trim off.
Yeah, I can't help you on that one. I'm trying to remember what it looked like. You might be able to get hold of Sean at Roadtrek. He's in customer service, and see if he can help you. Sean Hines, H-E-I-N-Z.
Sean Hines.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, John.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, anything else? We've gone well past the hour, folks, which I guess is a good thing. We've got Kathleen has her hand up, so go ahead, Kathleen.
Hi, Jan. Quick question about I have a friend who has a 2005 Versatile. We have the 2007. They continually had leaks around the top little box part. So they had their windshield replaced. It still continually leaked. My guess was it was where the fiberglass roof comes down to the metal, because when I looked at it when the windshield was out, it didn't look like there was any seal or anything in there. Anyways, I sealed it with silicone all the way across. Thank God, leaks stopped. But what is supposed to be there? Like you can see, like I took pictures that there's a gap, like where the windshield meets to where the roof meets, like there's a the black rubber that goes around it. But behind that rubber, there is absolutely nothing. There's just a space to see into the roof.
And what year was this?
2005. Like the plastic stuff that goes around the windshield with the aluminum tracking in it.
There should have been a sealer there.
Yeah, there's actually a space of probably a ½ inch between that weather stripping and where the roof goes, but there's nothing there. I guess the previous owner had leak problems too, but could never figure it out.
Yeah.
Now, like I said, I sealed it all the way the full length of the windshield across. It hasn't leaked since, but I just
Yeah.
said you shouldn't have it.
Yeah. It sounds like you did the right thing, and that should have been sealed back there. That probably was something that they didn't do at the factory when they built it.
Okay, great. Another quick question about that is that they took it into a place to have it done, and it made it a lot worse. They took out the die core that goes like along the edges,
right?
And then they put it like, I mean, it's like skimpy now, like maybe 1/8 of an inch. So where the awning is, it's still up where it was before. Now there's a huge dip, and then they have the die core. Should that not be evened out so it goes above the windshield, like draining down and not draining down the side of the doors?
I can't visualize what you're saying. I'd have to see it.
Okay.
All right.
Sorry, that's all right.
Yeah.
Thank you for everything.
Okay.
Okay, do we have any, yeah, I see Frank's got another question here. Go ahead, Frank.
To the lady that has a problem with her propane on the refrigerator, I had that problem on my Dodge, and it was a thermocoupler they replaced, and it worked fine. It wouldn't light.
Yes. There's the way those fridges work, there's a thermocouple, but normally on a thermocouple, you'd see the pilot light. And then if the pilot lights, but then there's no flame, and then it shuts off, then the thermocouple isn't seeing the flame. If there's no flame at all, then there's something preventing gas from getting there. But it works on electric, so the fridge is working. It's just the problem is somewhere in the burner. And it could be the thermocouple, it could be the igniter, it could be dirt, it could be any one of those things.
Okay, any last questions before we start to wrap up? And Jan, why don't you share with us the services that you provide? And I know that you and I have talked offline about the challenges COVID has brought doing your live sessions. Jan, by the way, I'll let him explain it, but he does tutorials for people one-on-one. And I've suggested to him he might consider doing them on Zoom, and there might be a market there to help people. So you want to just conclude, Jan, by sharing with us what you do live and what you might possibly do if there was a request to do it via Zoom.
So what we do is we have what we call Own It University, where we want you to actually own your vehicle, not just drive it. And they're full one-on-one all-day sessions where we will go through your Roadtrek, just you and us, from literally top to bottom, inside and out. We walk around, under, over, into the engine bay, and through the interior, going through every system you have and answering all your questions. We have not done that because of COVID, but we are looking at either doing them somehow remotely. So if there's interest, if you're on Facebook, which I'm assuming all of you are, look at Kinetic Adventures Group. That's spelled KYNETIC Adventures Group. Go ahead and join us, and then ask, ask us about Own It Use, and we'll figure it out. Okay. We're not quite sure how it would work remotely, but if there's interest, we might do a couple of sessions and see if we can make it work.
Okay, well, I want to thank Jan for joining us. I told him it'd be about an hour, and I think it's been almost an hour and a half. So very interesting conversations, Jan, and I don't think anybody stumped you too much, so that's great. We appreciate you taking the time. Well, it's been good to be with you folks this morning. Hope everyone enjoyed the session and had some good knowledge from Jan and the questions and answers we had. So I think next month, October 17th, we're going to have Bob Smith talk to us from Europe. I don't know if you've seen Bob's postings, but he is currently driving around Europe in his Roadtrek. And so he's agreed to come and share his experiences of traveling in a Roadtrek in Europe. And maybe it'll be interesting to learn how he got there, how he got the Roadtrek there, how he's finding his way around the various countries. I think right now he's parked in Italy, if I'm not mistaken. And he's shared some interesting posts. So for any of us who may aspire to go 6-month nomadic, it's kind of like the road trekker version of the young adults who go backpacking. So he should be an interesting presentation with all of his experiences, and hopefully he can give us his list of 10 top tips on how we can follow in his footsteps around Europe for 6 months, for those who may wish to do that. So we'll see you then.
Thank you much, Doug.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.